Now, either last week or the week before, I can't really remember, I looked at how Road Atlanta, the quaint little track near Brazelton in Georgia, became a holding pen for some of the best reefer you could find in 1980s America. The Whittington brothers, along with their mate Randy Lanier, were among the most prolific drug smugglers in the world at that point, causing suspicions in the race series they entered because they somehow had huge budgets for people with virtually no racing pedigree. And it's for that reason that in the 1980s, IMSA became known as the International Marijuana Smugglers Association. But over here in England we have our own narcotics entrepreneur, a man who got banged up for several years in the early 1990s. That man was Vic Lee, of Vic Lee Racing. Now it's going to be mostly talking ahead in this one because, trying to find images that I'm allowed to use, so you might as well whack me on in the background. I'll do what I can though. So VLM was the team running the iconic BMW 3 Series in the early 1990s, running the equally iconic and definitely, of the time in terms of colour scheme, the pink, cyan and yellow Listerine livery. In 1992, these cars lit up the back pages of all the newspapers and became household names after that race at Silverstone. Now, long story short, and I think the whole race is on YouTube, Steve Soper got punted off by David Leslie on the first lap and then did a last to first challenge like he'd been given a new engine for Brazil or something like that, and he'd caught up to his teammate Tim Harvey, who was battling with John Cleland and Will Hoy. There was a little bit of scuffling and Harvey dropped back behind Cleland and Soper, and then at Club Corner, as it was at that time, Soper sent it on Cleland to lead to that moment where Cleland announced he was going for first. Soper then managed to let Harvey through at Abbey, and then going into the Bridge Priory Brooklands section, Cleland tried to repay the favour, two-wheeling it through Brooklands only for Soper to absolutely body the Vauxhall at Luffield. Something might get away with that in Germany where he's Mr Superstar, but here we race clean the man's an animal. And this was also at the beginning of the fabled Super Touring regulation, so it was already box office and didn't need unnecessary drama dragged out online. Well, online didn't really exist at that point, but you know what I mean. So the head honcho of this piece of racing folklore was a guy called Vic Lee, who ran the eponymous team in the BTCC. It was also successful given that Jeff Allam had won his class in 1990 in an M3, then in 1991 the late Will Hoy won his championship in an M3, and then the aforementioned Tim Harvey title in 1992. They also prepared customer cars for some of the privateer teams on the grid, most notably for a driver called Matt Neal, who in 1992 ran Hoy's old 1991 car rebranded in his dad's company colours. Now that company is called Rimstock, and they're based around the corner from my old office in West Bromwich, and Rimstock is the company that supplies the rims to V8 supercars down in Australia. So this was a decent operation. It was successful, it was well funded, it had connections to the privateer teams for some extra income. So nothing to see here, right? Not exactly. Now when you build a racing car, you need to make sure it works properly so you don't look like an idiot in the race, and in that era, testing was very, very common. Now Formula 1 teams would often club together to rent out Silverstone or Estoril or Barcelona for the day and spend a few days testing because the costs were nowhere near what they are today, and how much it costs for teams to rent out these tracks I can't actually find out, but they would hire tracks out at the end of a season and just before the final race to test tyres, engines, gearboxes and stuff for the following year. Now in the UK we have 8 venues that a BTCC team could test at: Brands Hatch, Silverstone, Croft, Thruxton, Snetterton, Knockhill, Alton Park and Donington Park. Honourable mentions also go to Cadwell and Pembrey. Basically the 8 venues that make up the BTCC calendar. I mean, you might as well test where you're going to be racing so you can have all the relevant data. But VLM had decided that instead of testing at any of those 8 venues, they decided the track they would test their cars at would be Zandvoort, a track famous of course for being just up the road from Swindon. But they were going in and out far too often, and I think some of the people at the docks might have been racing fans, wondering why the hell the Listerine BTCC BMWs were testing at Zandvoort of all places, when the UK already had 8 existing venues, 2 of which being world-renowned circuits having hosted Formula 1 races, although this was 1993, so Donny will have hosted the F1 by this point. So when they arrived back in Sheerness, Customs and Excise decided to collar the team transporter and have a look around. And inside the transporter, they found 40 kilos of cocaine, having a street value in 1993 of about £6 million. It was all part of an operation called Operation Bounce, a customs initiative to try and slow down the smuggling of drugs into the UK from the continent, and a racing car transporter would have probably been a bit more inconspicuous than a plain white van. But according to an article on the bus that I retrieved online, what the customs officials did was they found the coke, put fake cocaine in its place, and then sent the lorry on its way. So, just like Randy Lanier and the Whittingtons, Vic Lee was sent to prison, and 10 of his staff were detained at the port but were then released with the lorry that now had the fake coke on board, which I'm assuming was all picked up later. Not that it makes any sense to do that. There's fake coke on board that lorry. They'll get back to base and just tell everybody that they got caught, the coke's fake, and the whole operation will be blown, no pun intended, wide open. Because blow is another term for cocaine. I've played Grand Theft Auto. When Lee was sent to prison, the whole operation was liquidated and all the assets were bought by Ray Bellum and Steve Neal, who in turn founded Team Dynamics. Now, Steve Neal is the father of Matt Neal, who were using the old Wilhoy BMW. The assets were then moved to Dynamics' new factory in Pershaw in Worcestershire. Lee was sent down for 12 years in 1993 but was released on parole in 1998. He then started working for Team Dynamics. He then took over Bowman Motorsport, where he started Vic Lee Racing as opposed to Vic Lee Motorsport, and then got connections with Peugeot to run their cars in the BTCC. But because Vauxhall dominated the 2001 season, Peugeot pulled their factory support and he was left on his own. So for 2002, they acquired sponsorship from Halfords, which is a bit like our version of Super Cheap Auto, or O'Reilly's, maybe a bit of that outdoor adventure shop that Danica Patrick did the ads for. Can't remember the name for it now. I was looking for the ads everywhere earlier, but I can't remember what it was called. Academy Sports. There's a bit of Academy Sports in there as well. So now you know what Halfords is. VLR became their focus for a bit, but after some poor performances, Halfords took their money to Team Dynamics in 2004. So it seems wherever and whatever Vic Lee does, Team Dynamics are never far behind. Well, at least Steve and Matt Neal are never far behind. In 2005, though, Lee was banged up again for drugs. This time it was only £1.7 million worth, but it was the same sentence he received in 1993. 12 years. But once again, he only did 5 of those 12 years. When he was released, he walked straight into a job at Corbo, the people who make race seats and stuff like that. And guess where you can buy Corbo seats and stuff like that? Halfords. Which team does Halfords still sponsor in the BTCC? Team Dynamics. And this caused an absolute minefield of controversy because racing fans across the UK and even the world kicked up a fuss over someone who had been convicted twice for drugs got a job as a managing director at a big motorsports brand. There were even calls lobbied towards the producers of Top Gear to change the safety gear seen on the reasonably priced car, as the reasonably priced car at that time, the C''D, had Corbo seats and harnesses fitted. In response, Lee said, "This is something I can never get away from, but it's something which I have been punished and which I would like to put behind me once and for all. But people won't let me do that. I don't know what people want me to do. Do they want me to come out of prison and go on the dole at the taxpayer's expense?" The dole is unemployment benefit. Those were the days, being treated like scum because you'd accidentally filled in one of the boxes incorrectly. Sorry about that, I brought up some stuff. Lee then added, "I've been lucky enough to pay for my crimes and now I've been given the opportunity to get back into the industry I love. People should see me as an example of the prison system working properly, not jump on me every time I do something new. The way people talk about me makes me seem like I'm some sort of monster, but I've paid for my crimes and I want to move on with my life." Now some might be thinking, but he got caught with drugs twice. But when you think about it, he did 5 years of a 12-year stretch. By going back in again for drugs, he made sure he did 10 years total. Big brain moment, although it's still 10 years of a 24-year sentence. And one angry person wrote to a local Birmingham newspaper at the time, "I don't understand how this convicted drug dealer can be put in charge of a luxury sports brand." That's how people talk around here. Not only that, but they sell their goods at the likes of Halfords, and I may ask if this is responsible behaviour from a public limited company that sells children's bikes. Some people. He was a drug smuggler, not a dealer. But according to Vic's LinkedIn page, he's still there, so fair play to him. He's getting on with his life like he wanted. So anyway, a look at Britain's answer to the Whittington brothers. If you've learned something here today, then be sure to give this video a like. And for more stuff like this, why not get that subscribe button clicked and get that bell on if you haven't already filled that criteria, so you never miss out on a future video. Massive thanks to the patrons of this channel via Patreon. If you wish to give me a monthly tip, you can do so by following the link in the description, where will also be a link to Discord and also vague directions to my socials. It's also Christmas soon, so I'll try and have some stuff up over next week before going on a break that will probably ruin me from an algorithm point of view, but I've got the ACC stream on Sunday for a chilled out hangout there, and see if we can get the gang back together for another Wreckfest thing on New Year's Eve. I'll ask around. But, if I don't see you in a video between now and the next one, have an alright Christmas. See ya.